All right. Good evening, everybody. It is so good to have you here for the fourth installment of the Mental Health Nights. I get the pleasure of introducing our guest today because I know him. Tonight, we are going to be hearing from Alan Walker. Alan was a pastor in Springfield, pastor in Yoncalla. These last several years, he's been working as a pastoral counselor out of like 5 different locations. Three. You were at 5 at one time, I think. He is councils in Cottage Grove, in Eugene, in Yoncalla, several different places. He has a wealth of knowledge and lived experience from his life, walking with people through dark things, walking through his own experiences and everything, and does a lot of his wonderful work now ministering to individuals and couples and helping them learn how does this thing of spirituality, healthy emotional states, mental health, how does it all come together so we can have wonderful, beautiful relationships that honor God, honor each other, and help us live more abundant lives? So I am thrilled to welcome my friend Alan Walker. Could you give him a warm welcome as he shares with us today?
Well, thank you, Pastor. I appreciate it. Well, man, oh man, I don't have any offices in Eugene. I do have one in Roseburg, however. Roseburg, Yoncalla, and Cottage Grove, right over there at Riverside Church of God. Yeah. Well, hey, I'm glad to be here tonight. Boy, those lights are right in my eyes. I don't know if it matters or not. Well, I can see pretty good. Anyhow, hey, glad to be here. Was really glad to be here last week when I heard Andrew speak. Wasn't that a great one on OCD? And I have a friend. I have a friend named OCL. You know what I call him? And that offended him, so I don't do it anymore. But I called him OCD one time. Oh well. Anyway, it's probably because I have OCD. I don't know. But hey, I just wanted to start by saying, as a Christian, a former pastor, and a pastoral counselor. If Wes were here, I would say Dr. Wright and Chloe. I appreciate your making this emphasis on mental health awareness. It's such an important thing. In my circle that I came to faith in, mental health was neither cussed nor discussed. It was ignored, totally ignored. It was really interesting. The premise in those days was that mental health issues and marriage issues were simply a result of lack of faith. And what you needed to do is pray more and go to church more and read your Bible more. Those were the 3 big answers. And there's nothing wrong with any of those. Those are all great ideas. And I encourage you to do all of those things. I don't know if you ever remember these years, but I remember the Paxil and the Prozac years when those are antidepressants, as you probably know, and when people started taking those, oh my goodness, the phrase or the sermon title would be, "O ye of little faith," because you have to depend on a drug. And then and I started taking them. Oh my goodness, and that was quite interesting. So mental health has come a long ways in the church, a long ways. We're not quite there yet. I think you might agree with that. We have a ways to go to understanding mental health and mental illness. In my, MAPC, I think you said that what it stands for. If you did, you're wrong. Donita says, that's my wife, that's Master of Arts, pretty cute. Yeah, well, anyway, forget that. Master of Arts, pastoral counselor, got my degree from Liberty some years back. But regardless of titles, in my counseling practice, about 80% of my clients that come to one of my offices, or I also do TheraLink, which is like a Zoom program, are struggling to formulate a marriage that works. They're struggling to have a spiritual and mentally healthy marriage. And it doesn't matter what marriage they're in. Some are in their second marriage, third marriage, fourth marriage, and some are in their fifth or sixth marriage. But the thing they all have in common, they're trying very hard to make this one be the last one and make it a spiritual and healthy and happy marriage. And I take my hat off to them. I'm really glad they're investing in trying to make it work. Let me tell you a story about the Smiths. Yes, the names have been changed to protect the guilty. So let me tell you about the Smiths here. Mr. Smith, it was in the Marine Corps. And I knew he was in the Marine Corps. Anybody a Marine here? Wes is a Marine, right? No, well, anyway, he should have been. But anyway, Wes's son maybe is a Marine. But anyhow, I knew he was a Marine when he came in because I think within the first minute he called me sir 5 times. And I finally said, "You're in the Marine Corps, we're in the Marines, weren't you?" "Yes, I was." Well, when he was overseas in one of the desert storms or something like that, he was married to Mrs. Smith, and Mrs. Smith, for whatever reason, loneliness, abandonment issues, or just whatever, decided that she would have an affair. And when he came back after 18 months, she told him. And that caused some consternation in the marriage, caused some tears and stuff. But they made it work. And then a few years later, he went off again to another situation overseas. And when he did that, he came home from that, and one of his fellow Marines told him that, "Hey, while you were gone, I was sleeping with your wife. She's a good gal." And that caused some significant issues. And that's when they came to see me. That's when he called me sir 5 times in the first couple of minutes. And they came to see me, and frankly, I usually ask people this question when they come in, if it's a marriage thing. If it's something else like grief or loss, I don't ask this question. But if it's marriage, I'll usually say, "Now, are you here to fulfill your duties to say, 'I saw a counselor,' and if it doesn't work in the first 30 minutes, you'll move on down to the attorney?" And this couple couldn't really answer that question. They did want to try, though. So that was good. And but as they sat there in my office telling me their stories, they were both dissolving in tears, regret, shame, remorse, and regret. And I just honestly had no idea, but that's not my job to know if it's going to work or not. So we just do our very best. And in 5 or 6 sessions, they chose, well, within 2 sessions, they chose to move back in together. And then they chose to get back together, and they chose to buy a new home together. And then this makes everything work. They chose to have another child. Anyway, my advice would have been something different, but they never asked me on that. But you know what? I don't ever hear from them again. They've never heard from them. They came in for their last session and said, "You know what? We feel that we're doing really good, and we're thinking about going to church and everything." I said, "Wow, that is awesome. Call me if you need me." They are a great success. But I got to tell you, not every couple that comes to see me or any counselor, except for maybe Andrew over there, actually has a 100% success rate. So unfortunately, I'll tell you one in a little bit that's not as happy. Anyway, does the Bible suggest there may have been complications in marriage in the early church when things were so exciting? Well, that's a good question, because we think, oh no, not in the early church, not after the day of Pentecost, and not after having Paul come in and talk to us and stuff. Everything would have been wonderful, but that's not exactly what the Bible says. When I was at Liberty University, most of my classes were online, but I had to fly back to in August. Think about that, going back to Lynchburg, Virginia in August. I lost 120 pounds in 1 hour because of the humidity. That's not quite true, but it felt like it. Dr. Rice shared with us that within 2 years of our graduation and hanging out our shingle, that in whatever state, whether we're in Alaska or Oregon or Virginia or wherever we might be, we would be at the point already of not accepting new clients. And I thought, oh, that's crazy. That's not, he said, not only you 5 or 6 in this class, but all counselors in the United States. And so when people call me and they say, "Are you taking new clients?" I said, "Well, sure." I said, "Really? Because nobody else is." I said, "Well, They're better than I am, and that's probably the reason why. So, anyhow, we just live in a hurting and devastated world. On the way, before we even left home tonight, Donita had been talking to either Audrey or her niece. I don't know who you were talking to. And our niece up here in Eugene, their house was a drive-by shooting. And they had a lot of bullets went into their house, and one went into the mattress their little guy was sleeping on. Isn't that crazy? So we live in a terrible world. Marriage is just one example of our fundamental moral values sliding. So if you discover, and you may or may not, but if you ever discover a complication in your marriage, please take the time to sit down and talk to your spouse about it. Talk to them. And if they don't listen, that's why God made frying pans. Hit them a couple times, they'll listen maybe. Well, here's a pretty good way to do that. You think, well, how am I going to do that? How do I sit down and do that? Well, here's a good, safe way. You might think, well, that's nuts, but no, it really works. If you need to have a very serious conversation and you don't want to necessarily look your spouse in the eye, you go to bed, turn the lights off, lay on your back, and then you say, by the way, I want to talk for a few minutes. And they go, huh? What about? And you say, I think we have problems in our marriage. And nobody's going to jump up and turn the lights on, I can promise. You're just going to sit there, and you guys are going to talk through that or talk about that. One of the worst things we can possibly do if we feel things are shaky under our foundation of marriage is just to let it slide, to let it go away, or to pretend that we'll just it'll get better tomorrow. Yeah, that doesn't quite work. It could, but it doesn't do it very often. So if there's a complication in your marriage, or you know someone that has a complication in your marriage, help them or suggest to them to talk to each other, or talk to their pastor, or talk even to their medical doctors. Medical doctors even do way more than just writing them prescriptions. Or maybe talk to your chiropractor, one or the other. But do something like that. Talk to a professional doctor, or if nothing else works, see a pastoral or a marriage counselor. Marriage is just too precious to waste. So let me tell you about a couple that haven't been real successful, and they're the Joneses. Last year, I met with them for 6 sessions, and I finally had to say, man, I think it's time for you guys to seek some other help, some other professional help. They teach us in college that when it's beyond our ability, we always just refer them out, which is a great idea. So I did. And then they called back, and I didn't even recognize the name, but they called back and said, well, have we met before? Yeah, my wife's the one that told you that she hates your counseling. I said, oh, I remember her. I said, is she coming in too? Yes. I said, cool. They've been in 2 times. Andrew had the great joy of meeting at least one of them this last session, because I work over there at Riverside. But I keep notes pretty good, and I put on my iPad, I was writing first session, second go around, no change. Nothing had changed. They'd still dislike each other. They still pretty much hate each other. They still fight and argue and scream. You heard them all the way down there, right? Clear at the end of the building. Wow. And so I have the ability to turn my hearing aids off, but they were in deep trouble, and they are so spiritually unhealthy. So I said, well, where do you guys go to church? I don't remember where they go. I think it was Santa Clara. No, just kidding. I don't know where they go. But no, I don't know where they go. But they go to church, and I'm thinking, well, guys, you got to pay attention. You got to listen. And he took exception with me, and you might as well. But he took exception because he hates the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman. He just hates them. I said, well, what do you hate about them? I don't like what they have to say about sex. I said, how old are you, sir? I'm 56. I said, okay. Did you know the 5 love languages don't talk about sex in the book? Oh, I said, well, you know what I mean. I said, I actually have no idea what you mean. Which that went into another screaming match, because I don't know if you've ever heard these things, but his wife suggests all that he wants is, well, that word. And she said, well, you get it 4 nights a week. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, 4 nights? Well, I am 67, so it's a little different for me, I guess. But I said, that's not too bad to him. I don't know why I said that, but I did say that to him. And but anyway, what are you going to do? So I have a session with him in 3 weeks, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to be absent that day, and Andrew, you're coming in to cover. Get him on the Enneagram, okay? Okay. So anyway, not all sessions work out as well as others. The second thing might be, does the Bible suggest that does the Bible suggest there may have been complications in marriage in the early church when things were exciting? I already said that, but I guess I'm coming back to that. Yes, there are a couple of verses of Scripture that actually talk about the fact that there may have been complications. A pretty hidden away passage, often overlooked, especially by guys, and I hate to say that because it's written to guys, is that passage in 1 Peter 3:7 that says that it says this, husbands, that's a pretty good indication he's talking to guys, in the same way be considerate as you live with your wives and treat them with respect. That's the first key word. As the weaker partner, don't belabor that point. As heirs with you of the gracious gift of the Lord. They're heirs with you. And catch this, our spouses, our wives are heirs with us of the gracious gift of life. Now just ponder on that. Just think about that. That means they are family. They are recipients of the gracious gift of life that we also have, and it's an outstanding passage. And it says if we don't do that, it's going to hinder our prayers. Isn't that how many have read that passage at one time or another? Isn't that a great passage? No. But if you're not treating your wife right, it actually affects our prayer life, which affects our mental health and spiritual health in our marriage. When our prayers are hindered, it's because of one of two things. One, we're not praying, or two, our spouse is well, let me just go on. It's because we're not praying or we're doing something to block the prayers. You ever said to yourself, I wonder, I sometimes pray and I just feel like my prayers hit the ceiling, that's about as far as I go? You ever think that? Well, it could be, but it's also because maybe we're not treating in our marriage, we're not treating our spouses correctly. So I want to talk about hinder just for a moment. For those of you who are students of the Greek, the word hinder is in the present passive infinitive, and it means literally to cut into or to cut out or to impede. A person who hinders is a person or a spouse who is breaking up the road, much like the guys on the highway and the city and the freeway who stand there with a stop sign to make you stop so they can break up some more road. Or by placing obstacles in the way. MacArthur suggests in his Bible commentary on First Peter, suggests that it's a severe cutting off of the divine blessing, which shows how critical it is for the Christian husbands to lovingly care for their spouses. I think of when I'm driving down Highway 38 to Reed Sport, or I don't know, sometimes just driving through Yoncalla, which is not a communicable disease. It's a town in Oregon. That the guy who's the flagger, the flaggers, the flag says stop. And I know they do this on purpose to me, and I am not a paranoid person, but I know that they see me and they make me stay there longer than they would an average person. If it was Andrew, fly through, but me, stop. So they're hindering my progress, and that's what happens when we don't treat our spouses right in a mentally and spiritually healthy relationship. When we are in a mentally healthy and a spiritual healthy relationship, we do treat our spouses right most of the time. Donita's with me tonight, but she's agreed not to say anything. A very simple instruction this is. Very simple instruction for a healthy marriage. The key words are there. One of them is to be considerate, to respect. We'll talk about that a little bit later. There are fellow heirs, and don't do anything to hinder your relationship with them because it affects your prayer life. So that's an important passage. The other one, I'm going to have one more. The other one is, I hesitate to bring it up because it's where angels would dare not tread or trod, but it's in 1 Corinthians 7. Yes, that passage. But a mentally healthy and a spiritually healthy marriage will have a mentally and spiritually healthy sex life. Paul writes, now concerning the matters about which you wrote, it is good for the man not to have sexual relationships with a woman. I am so happy that he added to that and didn't just stop at verse 1, okay? But because of the temptation to sexual immorality, each man should have his own wife, and each woman should have her own husband, and the husband should give to his wife her, and this is a word that's not, this is English Standard, it's not NIV, so it's a rather interesting translation. It's exactly what it means, though. A husband should give to his wife her conjugal rights. Don't you like that word, conjugal? I thought that's only what happened in prison when your wife could come visit you or something like that. I was going to have us all say it together, but I don't want to. So, conjugal. And likewise, the wife to the husband. Now, that's a key passage for guys who are not mentally healthy, frankly. For the wife does not have authority over her own body. Isn't that a great passage? Well, it is. Anyway, because it's in the Bible. But I just love it when like this dude that was, I was just talking about, he brought his Bible last time because he wanted to preach to me. And I can always use a good sermon. I stress good, okay? And his wife said, you're not preaching because I don't want to listen to you. But he said, well, the Bible says that you have to give me conjugal rights. And I'm the man of the house and I have authority. And when he says that, guys, don't do that, okay? Two things. One is terrible exegesis. And secondly, I promise I won't get you too far. But when he says that, I can hear him really saying, hubba, 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 I want conjugal rights now. And I have a couch in my office, and I worry that I might have to leave the room because he's so aggressive in that area. One time he stood up twice. He stood up during a session. He stood up, and he's not very tall, but he stood up, and I finally asked him to sit down. And he said, well, what for? I said, you're making me very nervous. So he sat down. Or I was going to tell my wife on him. So it goes on to say, here we go. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer. Well, don't hinder the prayer, and then you can do that here. Do not deprive one another, except perhaps by agreement for a limited time, that you may devote yourselves to prayer, then come together again so that Satan may not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Wow, I can tell you in my studies, not my studies, but in my career as a counselor and as a pastor, I guess, men and women just don't read that passage the same way. And I'm not saying that the women should read it differently, but I am suggesting, guys, we should probably spend a little more time with that passage and really get the gist of what he's saying instead of and stuff like that. So, the question, were there sexual frustrations and irritations and annoyances in marriage in the New Testament church? Yeah, absolutely there were. Things haven't changed a lot in America. I think probably the key issue I deal with in marriage counseling has to do with intimacy or extramarital intimacy, but really the key issue, honestly, is communication. If communication works in your marriage, I just almost could promise that you'll have a pretty healthy, intimate life if you guys can communicate well. So I doubt that Paul would discuss issues of deprivation or depriving each other if such issues did not exist in the church. I don't think he'd just come up and say, I think we should talk about this. Those issues existed. And For us to do more than read them and take them in context is a horrible thing. To talk about authority over whose body, what's all that about? I wouldn't spend a lot of time on that. I would focus on what it does say instead of other things. So the second question I'd ask this evening, can we have in 2023 a mentally and spiritual healthy marriage? So don't have to raise your hand. Oh, up there. Good. Okay, well, congrats, man. I like it. My mom and dad, who are deceased, or I would probably still tell the story anyway, but they're both deceased, been gone for a few years. They were married for 35 years. And I put down my notes, 3 and 2 equal 10. What that means is my dad was married 3 times, and my mom was married 2 times, and between them and their spouses, and then the 2 of them, there were 10 kids. And I got to tell you, it was quite a mess. It was beyond belief sometimes. And they were struggling to try to just be alive and healthy, and they really didn't have much spiritual stuff going on. So they really projected a poor example to me and my siblings. I don't know if it was because my dad was 44 when I was born or what, but he went ahead immediately and went to work on the swing shift, where he would be gone when I got home from school, and I would be asleep before he got home from work. So he was gone all day, and that was pretty interesting. And then on the weekends, Mom and Dad would, there's a little bar in Yoncalla. You don't need to know anything more about it than that, but it's called the Why Not? And so they would always say, why not? And so they were down there on Friday, Saturday, and Sundays until the place closed. And they would come home and yell and scream and cuss at each other and throw things at each other. And one time my dad, in his drunken stupor, I don't know what I said, but it probably shouldn't have said whatever it was, took a swing at me, and I ducked it, and he missed, which was good. But the foundation of that home was horrible. And as a result of that, we learned some pretty horrible examples on how to be a husband, and in some ways a horrible way to be a parent. So hopefully that's not the case in your parents' life or in your life. So the question is, can we have a healthy marriage? Yes, absolutely. You can have a spiritually and mentally healthy marriage in 50, 60, whatever an amount of years. But you're not going to have it without putting in some effort. Remember the old story of Mom and Dad would say, you need to go out and mow the yard. I go, why? That's getting tall. Get the elbow grease into it. I never looked for a zerk, and I never saw a fitting. But anyway, I would go do it. And the truth is, no one's going to have a good, solid, healthy, mentally or spiritual marriage without putting some work in it. I want to say this, and you can disagree later, but the hardest work you'll ever be called to do is be a husband or a wife. It's one of the most difficult tasks in the world is to be married. Now you may say, oh, that's so not true. I just love my spouse. Oh, and I think it's great that you love your spouse. I love my spouse. Isn't she cute? She's just the cutest thing. But I'll be honest with you, there are times when she would say, not right now, of course, but she would say, it's work being married to Alan. Those of you who know me probably would say, God bless her. And God does. I'm away from home once in a while. So how do we have a mentally and healthy marriage? 2 foundational words, okay? 2 key words. Both are found in the book of Ephesians chapter 5. If these are in your marriage, then you can have a mentally healthy and spiritually healthy marriage because you're individually mentally healthy and spiritually healthy. So the first word is found in Ephesians 5:25. Any guess what the word might be? Do you say that? You said that, love? That's the word, love, agape. It's a good word. And husbands would say, everyone that comes in my office, every husband says, for example, one of my most recent sessions, husband and wife came in, and she said, I said, what's going on, guys? because she was crying. That's never a good sign. And I said, what's going on? She said, he cheated on me twice. I go, oh, crumb, that's not good. And she started crying, and I got a little teary myself. I thought, oh, no. And so I said, what did I say? I said, well, do you love your wife? Do you love your husband? She said, I love him. And he said, I love her. And that was good, I think. But then that's not enough, because the Bible clearly says in Ephesians 5:25 that we need to love our wives as Christ loved the church. Oh, no, am I in trouble now? And gave himself up for her. Oh, my goodness. So love is more than just a word. We can say it many times a day and many times in a marriage, but it's never just a word. It's something that would require action. We love our wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. What a challenge that is. So husbands, a foundational tool for you is to love your wife as Christ loved the church. And mark that down, write that down, memorize that in your mind. The second word is to wives. Do you remember the advice that Paul gave to the wives? What? Oh, yes, there is a word like that. But I wanted to take Ephesians 5:33. Then I'll comment on 5:25 again, or whatever that verse is, in a little bit. But the second word is to wives, where Paul says, however, let each one of you love his wife, then he says, as himself. First of all, love her as Christ loved the church. Now love her like you love yourself. And let the wife see to it that she respects her husband. I don't know if it was Joyce Myers or whoever wrote an entire book on what do men need, and it was the issue of respect, that they need respect from their spouses. And the word respect is a key word in having a mentally and spiritually healthy relationship, that we respect. Now, the King James uses a great word. Donita, I want you to hear this, okay? It's a great word. It said, reverence your husband. I feel good about that word, don't you? Well, not really. Okay, respect is good enough, okay? And it means to show deference to our spouse. So husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church, and wives are to respect their husbands. Now, love and respect for one another in marriage creates a mentally healthy marriage, and again, that has to be practiced. So I'm going to give you 3 things that you can do and you need to do on a daily basis, no day off. Should be done 7 days a week. I miss it every once in a while, but heard about it today actually, but that's okay. So 3 things you need to do to love and respect your spouse and to work on it. One is you need to give your spouse 3 kisses a day. Now, I love it when someone says, is that all? No, you kiss her or him as many times as you want to, but if you think about it, for the guy, he has to kiss her 3 times, and the girl, she has to kiss him 3 times. So that's 6 kisses a day. Can you live with that, folks? Can you do that? Andrew, can you live with that? All right, I'm happy. You'll not be in my office. So that's good, 3 kisses a day. Now what if they have morning breath? Kiss them anyway. Do this. Plug your nose. But then, you ready for this one? 3 hugs a day. 3 hugs a day. And then, so here's a secret on that. Tom, when you hug Ronalyn, you do hug her, right? I appreciate that. Huh? Oh, I like that. So the key is, Tom, when you hug Ronalyn, you just hug her until she breaks the hug, okay? And then, Ronalyn, when you hug Tom, you hold on to him until he breaks the hug. So that's the key to a hug here, okay? Just hold on, and then if they break the hug, it's okay. It's not wrong to break the hug. I mean, when the kid screams, I need to use the bathroom again, it's time to break the hug or whatever. Then 3 more things, just 3 times a day, say to your spouse, I love you. You don't have to say as Christ loved the church, but that needs to be in the back of your mind. I love you. So So you got that? 3 kisses, 3 hugs, 3 loves. I love you. That's some key stuff there. Love is an incredible word. Now, this is where I'm going to deal with your word, Chloe, okay? Love is an incredible word, and here's a secret to that word submit, okay? Where love exists, there is no debate over submission. For we choose to apply 524 that says that we should submit to one another. And we don't have that fight and that quarrel. But then someone will say, don't we have to have someone in charge and we have to submit to somebody to make this work? Absolutely. But most husbands aren't that smart, and most wives are, but husbands don't think they are. So here's the suggestion. The person that the husband and wife want to submit to is Jesus Christ. He's the author and foundation of all this. So if we are submitting to him, then we can submit to one another, and we can have a great and healthy marriage. Gary Chapman, you probably have heard of him. If you haven't, I'll introduce you. Has written this book. Have you ever read this book? How many have? Okay. Great book. Read it again. I'm serious on this. Read this book. Oh, I'm falling here. Call an ambulance. Okay, so it's called The 5 Love Languages, the secret to love that lasts. I buy these by the half dozen from Amazon, and then sometimes buy more because I require every client in marriage to buy this one. I had one guy said, is it Christian? I said, yeah. Well, I'm an atheist. I said, sucks to be you. But I didn't really say that, but I thought that. So anyway, I said, you don't want to buy the book? No. I said, it's only $10. No, I'm an atheist. I said, okay, great. Why are you at a Christian counselor for? My wife said I had to be here. So you know what he did within a year? They're still seeing me. In a year, he said, hey, what was that book again? I said, oh, that Christian book. He said, I said it with a smile. And he said, yeah, let me buy that. I said, good. And it's been revolutionary in his life. So if you haven't yet bought this book, Amazon will get it to you for $8.47 or something like that in 5 days or less. And you can get it. Hi, Aaron. Aaron Erlewine just said, I am watching you on stream. So anyway, now I don't even, if he rings again, I'm not going to pay attention to it. So here's the thing about this. This is a life-changing book. It's not the Bible, so don't ask me if I think this is more important than the Bible, because I don't, but it's an important book to your marriage to be mentally and healthy, spiritual healthy. Chapter 3 of this book is called, it's called something. Let me just tell you about it. It has to do, you outed me, he said. So it has to do with the love tank. You guys get the idea of a love tank? Here's your tank, and here's her tank. And you ask, so how full is your love tank? And you're hoping for 50% at least. I've had them higher and lower, but they get wherever they are, okay? And then you ask them, okay, so what do we need to add to the love tank? What can your husband or your wife add to this love tank that would increase the love tank, and you would be up to 80% maybe? And the one the wife almost always says is, okay, I'll say it. Communication. If we could just communicate more. If we could just talk, if we could communicate, if we could talk instead of watching the latest Netflix thing. If we could just quit binging on Netflix and talk about it. Don't rat me out here, okay? Thank you, Chloe. Is that just water? No. Okay, good. I like water. So communication is the thing. And so then I'll ask the guy, what can your wife do to increase your love tank? Let's not say it out loud, but how many guys might know what they might say? Yeah, ends with an X, and it's not X-ray, well, you know what it is. And I think, well, that's interesting. And then she goes quickly, communication. I said, I gotcha. So, and then the next 5 chapters or so deal with the love languages. And I want to just briefly touch on those because this really helps us to connect. It's like, I love you, I love you, I love you. And has your spouse ever said, that's just a word, can you show me that love? So the 5 love languages, as you probably know, are words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, physical touch, and acts of service. Now, my love language is not receiving gifts, but if any of you want to, give me a gift tonight, that would be okay. And if you're not sure, you don't want to read the book, then you can go on Google and say, love language quiz, please, and that'll tell you, and you can take some tests. So anyway, those are the 5 love languages. Now, what's interesting is that my love language is words of affirmation. And I didn't know until I took the test, but I really react to words of affirmation. When I was taking my master's, and some of you might know what a blackboard is online, it's the blackboard. And, you think, well, that must be really important. It means hardly anything on your final grade. But I was doing the blackboard, and I got 100% on the first blackboard. So I was pretty mentally and spiritually pretty excited. So I ran downstairs and told Donita, I got 100% on the blackboard. So I ran back upstairs, and I came back down, and now I don't know if you can picture this or not. Donita is standing on a kitchen chair facing the stairway, and I'm coming down thinking, I got 100%, I got 100%. And there she is with a couple pom-poms, I think. What were those? I don't know what they were, but could have been pom-poms. And she was going, A-L-A-N, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I'm going, yeah, I can live with that affirmation from now on. That's pretty good. Then I realized the blackboard didn't really count, but that did. That affirmation was great. So I was rocking it for a while. So now Donita's love language is not my favorite love language. And most guys aren't really fond of this one, but it's acts of service. So I want to be a mentally healthy and spiritually healthy husband. So she said this, and I quote, the sexiest thing in the world is a man pushing a vacuum cleaner. Really? I can't do that. My dad didn't do that. My grandpa didn't do that. My great-grandpa, they weren't even invented yet. So I went out to Costco and I bought you a what? A Roomba. And I got a Roomba, $300 or $500, I don't care. So all I got to do now to see her smile is push that button, and that whoo scares the Chihuahua, but she's happy, I'm happy, we're all happy. So, but there's more to acts of service. So one night, I was sound asleep. I was probably snoring. And all of a sudden, Alan. I go, huh, what is it? And she said, I've been listening, and I hear a noise in our bedroom. I said, a noise? It was probably me snoring. She said, oh, no, I think it might be a bat. I said, a bat? There's no bats in our bathroom either, or our bedroom. But what do you mean? And she said, and she started moving the curtains, and oh, my goodness, she shrieks in some high-pitched, I'm so glad my hearing aids weren't on, but it was a high-pitched scream, and she jumps out of bed, and she runs for the bedroom door and says, I'm not letting you out of the bedroom until you take care of this, and she slams the door. I'm thinking, oh, my goodness, is she mentally healthy? So anyway, then she opens the door and pushes the broom in and closes the door tight. If there was a lock on that door, she would have locked that door. And so I'm thinking, and I'm in my pajamas, and I'm thinking, my goodness, what am I going to do? So I turn a light on, and right over my head. I'm so glad I don't have any hair for it to get caught up in. And so anyway, I got that thing, and I was a Louisville slugger, man. I just popped that puppy up against the wall, and it broke its neck or something, and it fell to the floor, and I ran out and got a, what do you call it when you, dustpan. I got a dustpan, and I picked that thing up, and I walked by my wife. See this? And I threw it outside. And so as a result of that, the next week I got this cup. Isn't that the sweetest thing? I got a nice Batman cup. And then on my side of the bed is this she got for me as well. You don't need superpowers to be a superhero. And what's the point on that? acts of service. Last Saturday, she was the speaker at Living Faith Women's Tea, and the printer jammed, and she wouldn't work. It couldn't work, and so she was getting a little anxious about that. So I went in and I didn't use her printer. I just went to her computer, went to my Apple computer and brought that up, and sure enough, it worked, and I printed it out and gave it to her, and she was just all smiles. Acts of service. That's hers. Now, it's really important for me to say this, okay? That you don't want to get confused, because that's what sometimes people do when they say, oh, the 5 love languages. Well, mine is physical touch, so that's how I'm going to show love to my wife. Well, that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. But if her love language is quality time, then you want to make sure that you give her quality time. And if yours is words of affirmation, you want to give her words of affirmation. We're reading the book not to discover only ours, but their love language, so we can not just say it, but show it. My wife loves it. Well, at least she says she does. But she loves it when I take the garbage out. How many of you guys are in charge of that at your home? Nobody wants to share, but thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it, bud. You rock. Well, let me tell you a story, one more story here, about a couple that came into my office 2 years ago. Older couple. They were doing this, the nursing home shuffle. They came in, I thought, what am I going to do with this couple? Because they're old. They came in and they sat down on my couch, close to each other, but not too close. And so I'm always surprised a little bit. So I said, well, how old are you? Well, we're in our 80s. I said, great. How many years you been married? 50. 60 years. I said, great. So I asked him what was up, and she quickly said, I'll tell you what's up. He will not pay attention to me. I said, cool. And so I said to him, what's up from your point of view? She won't listen to me. I said, oh, okay. Then I said, how long have you guys not been listening to each other? And she said, 50 years. So I'm scratching my head, going through all of my syllabuses from Liberty, looking for 80-year couple that will not talk. What do I do? So I said, I got a deal for you. $10. I said, this book, $10. That's true. I buy them for 8 and sell them for 10. So I say, here's the deal, okay? You need to take this book home and read it out loud. This is how I ask people to do it. If you buy a book, not for me, but get the book, you need to buy it, and you need to sit down with your spouse on a love seat and read. She reads the first chapter out loud, and then he reads the next chapter out loud the next day. Sometimes with husbands, it won't be till the next week, but you get the point, right? And so I said, do that, and we talked some more about it, and they were unhappy. So I sent them home with the book, and 2 weeks later, I scheduled them out a little bit because I wasn't sure what to do. So they came back, and they walked in with all smiles and giggles and sparkle in their eye, and I thought, what in the world has happened? So I said, what's going on? They said, we read this whole book in 2 weeks. We read it. And we get it, and we love it, and we are talking, and we're happy, and it's just a life-changing thing. I said, wow, thank you, Gary Chapman, because it changed their life. They could be gone now, for all I know, but they did that. Well, so I can't recommend enough on this book, okay? So Dr. Ted Roberts out of Portland area has said that a great marriage is not rooted in psychology, and he's right, or communication techniques, and I think he's right there too. Though these may be helpful, a great marriage is rooted in solid theology. The only way a marriage will work is by getting our eyes on Jesus. Marriage's ultimate purpose, catch this everybody, marriage's ultimate purpose is not just for intimacy to take place, but that there might be a real character growth and development in the marriage. I thought, wow, that is so good. One of the saddest stories I ever heard was a guy who came to my office and said, dude, I'm a mess. I said, what's going on? He said, I've been married to my wife for 25 years. I said, Well, that's a good thing. He said, well, he said, the other night she was on her side facing the wall, so I rolled over and put my arm around her, kind of snuggled up there, and she was sawing logs. And I thought to myself, and this was sad, he said, excuse this one word, okay? He said, I don't know who the hell she is. Who is this woman? I said, what do you mean? He said, I've been married to her for 25 years and I don't know her. I said, wow. I said, let's work on that. So we began to work on that, but sadly, they divorced. And she never came in to see me or anything. And I don't know, how can you be married for 25 years and not know who your spouse is, really? But that happened. So let me wrap up this way. We can have a great marriage as we are willing to recognize and invest in the truth that it's not about me. If you can get that, we're doing good. It's not about me. As we wrap our minds around this, I feel we'll feel that we'll refocus on Jesus first and what he says about marriage and about our spouse and about our needs. And as we do, our needs will not cease to exist, but they will be wonderfully fulfilled. Quick suggestion, and then I'll turn it right over to you, okay? Quick suggestions, 4 of them. Read the 5 love language. Second, do a marriage checkup. Wes probably will not like the fact that he said he can do this, but he put me onto it. It's a program called Prepare and Enrich. Are you familiar with that? Okay, it's a great program. You're familiar. And so I use it for a lot of premarital and marriage counseling, but it's also designed for a marriage checkup. Now, so is there a hitch? Not really. It's one counseling session cost and $75 for the test. But you could probably find someone who would do it. Maybe even, it doesn't matter how expensive it is. It'd be a good idea if there's a problem in your marriage. Thirdly, pray for your marriage. Do it every day. I pray for Donita every day for a lot of things. One, that she'll stick with me. But the other ones is I pray for her that she'll have a great and satisfying life. And then also, catch this, don't be too proud to seek help. Don't be too proud to seek help. Thank you for letting me talk to you. Thank you, Aaron, for zooming in on us. And I'll turn it over to you, Chloe. I know
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for clapping for him. That was great. I'm going to open it up to questions if you want to stay up here. If there's any questions that anybody has for him about kind of his experience in counseling and counseling pastors, or what marriage counseling involves, or what his presentation was about, if anybody has any questions. I have a few, so I don't want to be the only one to do it. I see a finger pointing, but no hands raising. All right, here we go.
This one kind of terrifies me.
So you had an excellent suggestion or two about communication. Is there anything else as you rack your brain that you would encourage to do for good communication with your partner, or not do to ensure that good communication happens? Is there any other suggestions that come to your mind of what to do for good communication and what not to do for good communication?
Thank you. That's a great question, Andrew. And I know your wife put you up to that, so no, just kidding. So here's what I would say is not to do, okay, guys and gals? Don't, especially at the end of the day when you come home from work, don't use your communication time to say, your kids, your children, that they're our children, but your children have driven me crazy today. Or don't do that, or don't say, well, we got a collection notice and it's just terrible. So try to keep it positive, but I would say, I tell people this, they ask me that question, what should we do? I said, it doesn't matter, just communicate. Well, what does that look like? Just talk to each other. Well, what about what? I said, I don't care, the Dodgers, the Braves, church, Wes's sermon, pick it apart, whatever you want to do, or Andrew's sermon. Just talk. And so the weather, anything. When we drive in the car, my wife and I, when we drive in the car, I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but she does. And so we talk about all kinds of things. Some I can tell you, and some I would never tell you. But we talk about a lot of stuff, and so just talk. And the extroverts, The extroverts, take the Myers-Briggs test. The extroverts are less likely to talk. No. Let me reverse that real quick, right? The introverts are less likely to talk. So when you get an introvert married to an extrovert, one will talk a lot, another one. There's another book called by Gary Chapman, How to Communicate with Your Spouse. Great book. It's under $10. I remember one time that I was going on trips, probably with you. I could have been that other person. But anyway, I downloaded some conversation starters. Can you believe that? How do you marry somebody and just download? But I did that even. So, Andrew, you probably have some suggestions as well, but those are what I have. Okay, go ahead. Oh, you. Okay, good. I think she has a question over here. Well, yeah, after 25 years and they don't know who she is, I don't know if they can accomplish that or not, but it's possible. Okay, go ahead, Chloe.
You brought up that obviously, like some people grow up in households where it was a nuclear family, mom and dad were healthy, it was a good, healthy situation. But when you don't grow up in that situation, you're entering a marriage without kind of getting what you needed as a child, whether it was nurture, love from your parents, and so you're coming in with that emptiness, and then there's kind of a familial triangulation situation in which you're now expecting that from your spouse. You're wanting the love from your spouse that you didn't get from your parent, which isn't necessarily a responsibility that should be put on the spouse. So if you think about two individuals coming into a marriage in that situation, how would you encourage each of them to either enter not just marriage counseling, but also individual counseling? What would be the benefit of each person experiencing individual counseling in order to be a healthier parent and spouse?
That's a great question. Thank you. I would suggest that a lot of couples, by the way, that I do couples counseling with are seeing individual counselors, which is a great idea. So I think that probably when we come from a home that has very little, if any, communication skills, and the only communication skills our parents used were cussing and yelling and screaming and arguing Trump versus Biden. Oh, wait a minute, this would have been Humphrey versus Nixon. So when you have all that kind of stuff, you don't really learn a lot about communication. In fact, what you learn is really terrible learning. It's terrible stuff. So I don't think it's a big secret to some of my friends here that I was married before. And so I came from a home that was no communication, none. And then I married a girl who was a PK, and I don't know why, but she never learned how to communicate. She didn't know how to talk. She didn't like to talk. I thought, you get a kick out. This tells you something about me, Andrew. I thought she was very impressed with what I was saying. So for 2 years, she never said a word. So because she was listening to me. But I do know that communication is a foundational issue for a marriage. And so what I did is I sought some individual counseling. I don't believe that she did, and we had one session together. But what I would say is don't make the same errors your folks made, if you know what I'm saying. Let your kids know that mom and dad knew how to communicate. So tell me some more of your questions, because I think I've gone off track a little bit.
Oh, just when we don't receive, I'm not saying like
We don't
when
what?
Humans in general do not receive what their spouse doesn't have the tools to do.
I think many couples are fortunate enough to have parents who are Christians, and that's not the only factor, actually, but Christians who would communicate and share their love with each other and with their kids. I think a lot of families today, that's why we call families dysfunctional sometimes. I don't know, they are so dysfunctional that they don't know how to do those things, and so they would say they did the best they could by supplying money. We gave money and a Nintendo. So anyway, when we marry, unfortunately, this is a very general statement. Very general. Women think in marriage, again, I'm not, just general, very general, you could be the exception to this and probably are, that all of their social needs are going to be met by their husband. And so that's pretty cool, except when the husband has no idea what a social need is. Because his focus is, she'll meet all of my sexual needs. And so they're crashing. And so you want to, in a case like that, you want to get help early. You don't want to wait 20 or 25 years or 15 years. You probably want to get help early. You want to hook up with another married couple, like you and your husband probably, and spend time with you guys, or Andrew and his wife, and learn how healthy people have a relationship, and then learn from that. That's one of the things I would recommend. Okay?
And then I had one more.
Sure.
I was born in the mid-'90s, and so growing up, the kind of purity culture movement was very strong in the language of church and in the language of youth group, in which this was kind of, it was essentially sexual prosperity gospel, in which if you keep yourself pure, if you save yourself for marriage, you'll have the best sex life in your marriage, which is essentially prosperity gospel, only in a sexual sense.
Yeah.
So in your experience, how have you seen this idea of prosperity or purity culture negatively impact people that you have seen?
Well, what's interesting to me, and I'm not trying to judge anyone here, but what I've seen, I was product of the 60s, so, but I was around in the 90s. So what I've seen is that the dudes and dudettes who were promoting sexual purity, the people who were teaching you that oftentimes were as guilty as sin of not ever following through with that themselves. It was a thing to talk about, and it was a godly thing, and actually it could have been the only time in a church service or a church setting that you ever heard the word sex, because usually our churches would go, oh, you don't mean sex? Yes, we do. And so we were very ill equipped for that, actually, to talk about that or to learn that. Let me tell you a story. And this is probably more often than not, but one of my clients came in, and so again, I always keep Kleenex around, right? They were crying. She was crying, and I said, what's going on? She says, I didn't marry till I was 24, product of the 90s, I guess, and that she had kept herself sexually pure, a virgin on her wedding night. And that's commendable, and I think God honors that. I really do. But she said all of that, and now, then my husband has 2 affairs. I must not be good enough. God didn't really honor that, because I did that. I did what I was told, and then now our life is a mess. So I think that the purity thing is a great idea. It's a perfect idea. It's a lovely idea. My experiences with people have been that they weren't pure when they got married, or they weren't pure when they got married the second or fifth time. Just that most people were filled with lust and whatever. I do know one guy, his name was Troy. He divorced his wife, and I talked to him ahead of time. I tried to head it off. I said, so what's the deal? What's the deal, Troy? She's a nice lady. He said, well, I'll tell you what's the deal. She's terrible in bed. I said, whoa. So I was young. I should have passed that on to Andrew. But I said, so tell me, how do you know? And here's a key. He said, well, I have been with 10 other women. I said, well, there you go, buddy. Because if you had followed what Jesus had said about being pure, if you had, and then you had married this woman, then you would have no idea she was lousy in bed. And maybe she thinks you're not Mr. November yourself. So anyway, so I don't know. We live in a wicked world. I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, just you were kind of touching on it in the story of the woman saying,
Yeah.
I did everything I was supposed to do. What did I do wrong? And just kind of
Right.
how shame, how essentially prosperity gospel and the purity culture just invites kind of shame into it, and how that can erode a relationship more than it does push it more towards righteousness.
Right. She said something else, Chloe, that I was embarrassed about, because I was preaching in the 90s and teaching, and I was embarrassed that she said that, Alan, that The church never taught us anything about sex. We never used the word. And if we did, we were considered, you dirty little brat. So we never talked about it. No sermons on it, no lessons on it. At church camp, purity was the theme rather than whatever. And so the church in the last several years has done a horrible job on sexuality. I believe that it's making a change and moving toward better information and helping people at least know what they're talking about when they make choices. So, okay.
So through all the sessions we've been having, so
Yeah.
yours and all the ones that, all this month, a common thread is that, if you think you need some help, seek out the help. But at the very beginning, as you mentioned, and this has also been mentioned by others, is that all the counselors are, not all the counselors. There's a few like you, that are not as good as the others that are open for clients. But
Okay.
all the other ones are full. So with the number of people looking for help and the limited availability to find the resources to get that help, what is your recommendation on how for someone to seek a counselor?
Well, great question. There are, my understanding, and from what I read, would be that there are a number of people looking for help in their marriage. And they oftentimes bury that until they need to do it. And when they realize they need to do it, they're finding that several counselors, whether they're mostly secular, sometimes Christian counselors, secular counselors, or secular counselors who say they're Christian counselors, whatever, they are booked and they're booked out. And I've heard them say, we can't get in for 3 months. And I'm not sure our marriage will last 3 months. So what I would recommend in a case like that is maybe continue to call, ask your pastor, if you go to church, who they recommend, and could they put a word in for you to get you in sooner. And also, I don't hesitate on this too much. I just know that as a pastor, I wasn't prepared to deal with what I'm dealing with now without further education. So pastors, though, they can talk and listen well and pray with you, and so you can do that. You can see a medical doctor. A medical doctor is always lined up with all kinds of counselors, therapists, and all that. So you can see what they have to say. And I think what you want to do is I would recommend people begin early in their search for a counselor or a therapist. And then, I don't know, hopefully you get the right phone number and get the right person. Does that help at all or give you an answer? Probably doesn't help much, does it?
I know a lot of people have also found success in online counseling. That can help in there's even counselors around the country that you can meet with online. So BetterHelp is an online counseling
Great.
service. And then Faithful Counseling is a Christian online counseling service. Yeah, actually, Bushnell University, there's some who are like training to be counselors, and so there's sometimes just a $5, $10 fee to go and sit with people who are training and getting their degree in counseling.
That's a great answer, I think.
As well as the U of O, I think. Did anyone else have any questions? Are we good to who? Anyone? Anyone? Anyone?
So I've been thinking a little bit about, for a while, I think, what it is that we do as churches. So obviously, the mental health and the church series is part of this. But I think of, I think Chloe's done a really good job of sort of sparking these conversations, but particularly around the issue of, like the things we don't talk about. And sex, I think, is clearly one of them. Have you found that there are like small group programs or like things that can be said from like an actual central church position to try and break some of those sort of kind of obvious problems that we have in communication about, things that we've sort of hidden, whether that's sexuality or any number of things. Do you find that there are resources out there within the church world that are starting to break through, that are like a hopeful light into some of these things that we've kind of, like mental health, we've just sort of like, well, we don't want to talk about it. Have you seen some possibilities, and what kinds of things are you seeing?
Well, I think that just today I discovered, I think your dad was telling us about, or someone was, about Real Media, is that what it's called? The program where you can download videos and stuff, Real Media, I think it is. That there's a seven-part series for small groups on sexuality. And there'd be some obvious things like maybe no kids, no teenagers and things like that. Maybe mature adults who don't know everything and could listen to that. So there are things like that. I think that there are some healthy ways that we can discuss mental health and sexual health in small groups. But I don't know that I would make that my first small group, probably. And I think you'd want to have somebody in the small group that might be able to add in that area, or maybe have someone talk on that subject. Grove Camp has Grove Christian Camp has a marriage retreat every year. I don't know, I think we went to one of them. I don't have any idea if they ever deal with the subject of sexuality or not. I just, it's not the churchy thing to do, so I don't know. So I don't know how to bridge that gap, probably, how to break that gap. But small groups are a good place to start. There's some great books that you guys can read yourselves and things like that, I suppose. So I'm probably not answering your question very well.
All right, well, you guys give him one more hand to say thank you. Thank you so much, Alan. Well, that concludes our Mental Health in the Church series for 2023. I think one of the most incredible things is how many things in common our speakers were talking about. The fact that we, as Christ followers, are called to not just serve Christ, not just love him with all that we are, but to bear one another's burdens. And we can't bear one another's burdens if we don't know what each other's burdens are. And it's very powerful for us as individuals to say, I can't do this, I need help. And also to have the wherewithal to understand exactly what it is that we need, which is why it's so empowering to be vulnerable with one another. And I think the 5 Love Languages is a really great resources. If you haven't read that, it's $8 on Amazon. Check that out to be able to know, all right, this is what I need in order to feel loved, in order to feel seen, and this is how I can love those around me, as well as my spouse. So thank you guys so much for attending. We're going to hopefully do this again next year and continue the conversation of how do we love one another as Christ loved the church, sacrificing whether it's our time or our understanding. We don't always understand what each other is going through, but one powerful thing that Andrew said last week is 3 of the most powerful words that we can say to one another is, tell me more. It's time that we enter into one another's stories and love each other where we're at, because that's exactly what Jesus did. So I'm going to pray, and then I will release you guys into the world. God, thank you so much for all of the speakers that joined for this series. They came with their wisdom. They came to even share some of their scars and some of their stories. This has been such a holy experience of learning how to love one another as you loved us. God, I pray that we leave this place and leave this series as more empathetic listeners, as greater practicers of compassion and healthier friends, healthier Christians, and healthier spouses. God, I pray a special blessing over everyone in this room. And it's in your Son's mighty name we pray.